Hey everybody, Jeremy here from Shade Tree Vintage Auto and DD Auto and Salvage here in Logan, Utah. And today I'm going to go over a few things that make cars either project cars or parts cars, because it seems to be a big discussion that a lot of people don't really understand. So we're going to check some things out. So as any of you guys that have subscribed and watched my channel know, I run the salvage yard part, well, classic car salvage yard part, as well as the dealer sales for DD Auto and Salvage. And I deal mainly in Mopars. One of the things that happens a lot doing this business is people see some of the cars I'm parting out and they're like, that car is a perfect project. Why are you parting out? I'll use that Coronet right there as a perfect example, as well as that 73 GTX. And I'll tell you more here in a few minutes. So in this video, I'm just going to kind of walk around a couple cars that I've laid out here and explain why some of these are good projects, why some of these are strictly parts cars, and then just what makes a car a parts car versus a project car. And a lot of this stuff is just matter of my opinion, but some of it is factual stuff that really you can't change, such as paperwork, VIN issues, stuff like that. Anyway, so we're gonna go ahead and get started right now. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about is the vehicle identification number, also known as the VIN. The reason this car is deemed as a parts car only is because it was being built as a race car. And at that time, they took the dash out with the VIN tag and it is gone. And we all know how we all feel about rebodies and taking a rusty car with the good tags and putting the tags on here. You know, people, it's federally illegal, whatever. So what does that make this car? That makes this car a parts car, not savable, because there's no vehicle identification number due to that situation. But as you can see, there's a lot of great parts that can help save another car. So as solid as this car is, it's just a parts car. And I mean, it was a 75 or 76 slant 6 car, so nobody really would have wanted to build it anyway. Then this is another situation, but the same. This is a 66 Coronet 500, and yeah, this car could have been built pretty easily, but the VIN tag has actually eroded away, deteriorated, so there's no VIN tag. So again, can't be built. Now some of you guys will say, well, you could go get a state assigned VIN. Nobody likes that either. The value of the car is almost nothing because it doesn't have the actual VIN. And it seems to be mostly in the Mopar world where that kind of stuff matters, but it does matter. So instead of being a nice restored car that would be worth 30-40 grand, because it has a state assigned VIN, it might be worth 50%. Then you've got the issue of paperwork, the title, right? And some states are very strict about titles. Some states don't even require titles. So in those states, they don't really matter. Some states, it's easy to get a title if you need one and don't have one. Other states, it's like not even possible. So that all plays a big factor on whether these cars are parts cars or whether they are, buildable projects. So anyway, that is kind of the VIN issue. The second thing we're going to go over is a car that's already been used as a parts car or is stripped for whatever other reason. This car does have a good VIN and it has a title actually. This car could be built. But in order to build a car like this, you would have to have at least one parts car because it is stripped. Floor's been cut. I mean, it has the dash and fold down back seat, but everything else is gone. So the amount of money, effort, etc. that it would take to put this car back outweighs what the car is. And like I said, you would have to have a parts car or two to put it back together. So it's a parts car. I mean, it is solid. So you could take something that was really rusty that had a sunroof and everything, but usually the cars that are really rusty, you're still going to need to find another parts car that has solid doors and the other parts. So cars that are already stripped, have been used as parts cars, they just aren't really good for project cars. I mean, obviously this one's almost to the extreme where it's been stripped pretty good. If it's something that's just had a few little parts taken off here and there, that's a different story. But this car wouldn't really be a good car to build just because it's already so far stripped. I mean, everything's gone out from under it, all of that. But the good news is on cars like this is there's obviously at least one other car out there that's been saved because of this. Because you really, even with the aftermarket support that's out there, you cannot build cars without parts cars, which is why I'm here. So anyway, that is another reason parts cars sometimes are just parts cars. Now we're gonna go over our favorite thing, rust. Now this car actually was probably my first kind of viral car on a YouTube short when I had it on its side because we were removing the rear axle. This is a 73 GTX and it is actually a very rare car. The problem is there is not a usable panel, frame rail, piece of sheet metal on this car. I mean, you've got like hood hinges and a few other parts, but as far as sheet metal goes, there is nothing that is savable. And I promise there is nothing. I'm telling you that truthfully, and anybody that wants to come look at it can. I have offered this car before for $600 and nobody came and got it. And so I just continue to part it out. Cars that are this rusty, that have literally no frame rails, nothing like that, just aren't feasible to be built unless they're like a Hemi car or something, but we'll go over that a little bit later in the video. This car, like I said, is pretty rare, but there is no aftermarket support for these cars. Nothing. So, is this car worth building? As much as some of you guys are going to want to say yes, the answer is no, because the only way to rebuild this car would be to rebody it. Whether you take the tags off and put them on another body, or you remove every piece of metal, start welding a whole bunch of stuff back together, and then put these tags on it. Because there is no way to rebuild this car. There is not a usable piece of metal on this car, and I can assure you that. And firewalls all rusted. You can see the K-frames all rusted off. I mean, it is total junk. You can see over by the heater box holes. I mean, garbage. The rear bumper is literally falling off. So the only thing to do with a car like this, unless it is a Hemi or six-pack or something that we're going to go over later in the video, parts car. Just parts car, that's all it is. And it's barely that, really. Now we're going to go over value. And I'm talking beginning as well as ending value. Now we can all agree that a 69 Dodge Charger RT is probably one of the absolute most valuable Mopars out there currently. So this car, or any 69 Charger, 68 to 70 for that matter, pretty much worth restoring for several reasons. One, the ending value is great. The aftermarket support through AMD and other companies like that are awesome, and they're just absolutely beautiful cars. Now, the problem with cars like this, the Chargers, Cudas, Challengers, stuff like that, is you can't even get into an entry-level piece of junk for hardly anything because the value on these is so high. So as much as I would say some of these are just parts cars, if you have a reasonable anything on a 68 to 70 Charger, there is value to it. So they can be built, and I'm not going to say you're going to for sure get your money back, but there's a lot of love for these cars, and I would say not very many Chargers are parts cars just due to that, unless they're missing way too much already, like the roof's cut off and all of that stuff. The only exception of that being is if there's no VIN or paperwork. And then, I mean, it's a parts car. And like I said, cars that need to be restored need parts cars as well. So the value in the end of this is high. So worth restoring pretty much no matter the condition. Now, let's say that it is this 73 Satellite over here. That car has no ending value. Nobody wants one really. I mean, running, driving, fully restored, beautiful 73 Satellite two-door, you might get 20 grand out of it. I don't know if you'd even get that. But the cost to restore something like that will still cost you 40 or 50 grand. I mean, it's going to cost you almost the same to restore that as that 69 Charger. So the investment up front to buy that, even though it will be greater, will be way better than buying that. So now we're going to go over cost. So when I say cost, I'm talking not just the cost, the purchase price of the car. I'm talking more the cost of the build. So this car here, you can see somebody started building it. They even put it in paint and everything and just never finished it because the cost was way more than they were expecting. They got burned out on the build and they ended up selling it for pennies on the dollar like this because they were just done with it. Now, a lot of people don't realize how much it costs to actually build a car, to take a project such as that one and turn it into something like that. And this is why there are so many cars, unfinished projects like that one out there for sale, is because people get burned out and it costs a fortune. In order to do this car here correctly, it would cost you $100,000. Now, the sheet metal, everything, there's so much that needs to be replaced on this car. And realistically, if it wasn't for what it is, that car would be a parts car and that's it. And I'll explain that in a little bit. This car, that one is going to be built. That one is not a bad project at all. Even if it wasn't a 344 speed rally, that one's a good solid body, good project. And it is desirable because of the 340, the 4-speed. It's a 72, good color. That car is just a 318 car. It's really nothing too special other than somebody already did the body work. But there is a 408 stroker. I mean, they put a lot of money into that car and just got burned out because it can literally cost $100,000 to get a car, done. And that's a lot of money, and people don't realize that. And that's not just with Challengers. That's with any of them. You got A bodies, B bodies, all of them. If you want to build a Mopar, it's going to cost you some money. And that's just the unfortunate truth about it. Mopars are not cheap. I mean, none of them really are cheap, but Mopars especially are definitely not cheap. So you've got to think about the cost, if it's worth restoring. Obviously, the better car you can find, the less it's going to cost to restore. And I would suggest, and I know a lot of people hate on this, but watch for cars like this because you can literally get them, like I said, pennies on the dollar. And then all you have to do is finish them up and do what you want, kind of build it how you want. And it's going to save you a lot of money. And it's unfortunate that you're saving money off of somebody else's hardship, but they're the ones that are putting it for sale. They're the ones out there putting the price on it. So for lack of better terms, take that opportunity, take advantage of that opportunity, and you'll be way further ahead like this than starting with that. The sixth thing we're going to talk about is rarity and how rarity can play a big factor in the value of the car and whether it's a project or not. But the first thing I want to say and remind you is rare does not translate to valuable or desirable necessarily. Some things were rare for a reason. Other things were rare just because they were cool and exclusive. So this particular car, one of the reasons it should be built is this is an extremely rare car. It is a 71 Challenger. It's actually non-RT, even though the stripe says RT. It's factory black with a black stripe, luggage rack, had the red plaid interior, 6-way seat, all the RT stuff without being an RT. It was one of, I want to say 280 something or thereabout non-RT 344 speed cars in 71. But then you break down the options of it being black with black and the red plaid. this is almost certainly a one-of-one car. Now, if this was a one-of-one slant six dart, who cares, right? Just a slant six dart, nobody would care. So that's where the rarity doesn't really translate to value. But this was a Challenger, and Challengers, like the Chargers, not quite as much, have a lot of high desirability in the Mopar world. So this car should be, and eventually probably will be, restored. Anybody that's followed my channel knows that I am building this for the Ratty Body Challenge down at Matt's next year. I was gonna drop out because there's some frame damage in the back and in the front. Like, really, this car is super rough. Frames literally kinked in the back. The front end has been cut off, and that's a legitimate 70 TA front clip that's just halfway welded on. But the rare factor of this car, when it's done, if it was done correct, there would be some value. It would still cost more to restore it than the car would be worth in the long run, because it is a non-RT and it's just a small block car. But super rare, super cool, makes this one a little bit more worth restoring than if it was like a slant six car. But if it was a one-of-one Hemi car, it almost wouldn't matter how rough it was, as long as it had the tags and enough to build off of. It would definitely be worth building, and chances are it would still have more money at the top end if you were to sell it than what it would cost to build it. But you would need parts cars to do that. So rarity does play a factor in the value of the car. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. So you can't always just think, well, it's a one-of-one 318 74 Duster. Nobody cares. Literally nobody cares except for the person that owns it. But you have a one-of-one CUDA, everybody cares for some reason, and so that plays a big factor. So the seventh thing we're going to talk about is desirability. So obviously, the more desirable the car, the better off you'll be in the long run, and the more it will be appreciated, and the funner it will be in a lot of ways. So we're going to take this 340 Dart Swinger as an example. I know this isn't the most desirable car I've showed you here, but out of the A bodies, the 69 340 Swinger is a fairly desirable car. Way more than if you had like a 72 318 car. So if you can have a car that's desirable and find that and build it over one that's not, then that's going to make it a great project. But if you had a slant 6 69 Dart that was pretty clean, I mean, you could drive it, build it and whatnot, but it would make a fantastic parts car for the 340 Swinger if you had access to one of those as well. After all, the nicest parts cars, or the nicest cars, make the nicest parts cars for the ones that really, really need it. Again, if you can build a 340 car or a big block car or something that has some sort of significance with like the sporty Roadrunner, GTX, RT, CUDA, any of that over just the base models, you can look at the top end like a 25 to 50% gain over just a basic one. And realistically, it costs about the same to build a base Dart as it would the 340 Dart. The only difference would be purchasing the 340 Dart in the front, on the front end, and building that over the 318 car. So it's going to cost you a little more in the initial investment, but in the long run, it's going to be a way better investment. So now we're going to talk about condition. The overall condition in the beginning of the car can be a big deciding factor whether it will be a parts car or a project car. Obviously, the better condition the car is, the better chances of being a really good project. So we're going to use this factory Moulin Rouge 70 Duster. It's a 318 car. It's fairly complete. It does have the incorrect fenders on it currently, but fenders are obtainable that are correct. But you can see pretty much everything is there. It has the interior, the engine, trans, 8 3/4. The big issue on this is there was a really poor quarter panel repair job, but there are quarter panels available for this, and you put a new quarter panel on it, fix the jam and all that stuff. It's really not going to be that much of a project compared to something that is just terribly wasted. So this car would be a great project for a couple reasons. One, the factory Moulin Rouge, which plays even if that car was really rough, because FM3 paint code, 1970 only, with the exception of a few 71s that somehow slipped out. That color is a very desirable color, so it goes back to that desirability factor. If that car was a 70 factory Moulin Rouge car, that would make that a project car versus a parts car just because of that paint code. So desirability, but we're focusing on condition right now. So that's a pretty good condition parts or project car, where, like I said, that one already stripped, not good condition, perfect parts car. If something was destroyed, such as the dart on the bottom over there, that is a parts car only, because I mean, obviously, look at it. So you got to look at the beginning condition of what you're starting with, and that plays a huge factor in a lot of the stuff we've already discussed, the cost and everything like that. So like I said, beginning condition. The ninth thing we're going to talk about is parts availability, and I'm mainly going to be referring to the aftermarket support. So let's say you have this Chrysler 300. I believe there is basically zero aftermarket parts support for that car, which means in order to do anything on this car aside from drivetrain, it's going to require at least 1 or 2 parts cars to find everything you need. So that is why these are great parts cars. This car has some rust and everything, but it has a lot of great parts for somebody that has a way better Chrysler 300. So this car is going to be parted out. The other problem with these cars, a lot of Chryslers like this, is they've been derbied. And so there's not even that many parts cars out there because they've just been destroyed by demolition derbies, whatnot. So you've got to look at the parts availability. Now, for like this Duster, lots of aftermarket support. You've got sheet metal, you got suspension, you've got all sorts of stuff. E-bodies, there is so much stuff. You could essentially build an e-body or a 68 70 Charger. You could really basically build one out of the AMD catalog. QA1, they make a bunch of stuff, like all the suspension to do amazing things on A's, E's, and B's. In fact, if you look at the 69 Roadrunner convertible that we're building with Rust Bucket Garage, that's getting tons of AMD stuff. It's getting tons of QA1 stuff. That car is going to be amazing because of the aftermarket support. But when you have cars like that there's no aftermarket support, or like the 73 Roadrunner, they're a lot harder to build. They actually get to be almost more expensive because you have to wait and find what you're looking for, because essentially what's out there is what's out there. And if you can't find good parts, you're going to just be sitting there waiting or trying to fabricate stuff yourself, and it ends up being a big headache. So always be sure to look at what you're getting, and before you purchase the project, look and see what kind of aftermarket support is available. Because if there's no aftermarket support, it's just going to end up being a big headache. So the 10th and final thing I'm going to talk about that can help determine whether a car is a parts car or not, and it can change a car from being a parts car to a project, is either sentimental value or historical significance of some sort. So like, let's say that you have a car that is documented, which is a very big and important thing on historical cars. If you have something that was a documented movie car or had some sort of crazy historical significance, such as the 1970 Roadrunner advertisement car or anything like that, those cars, even if they are extremely rough, if you can prove that it has that significance, that turns it into a project car. And just kind of a side note on those, I am 100% against trailer queens, cars that are pushed on and off trailer and just sit in car shows and whatnot, show poodles essentially, with the exception of historical cars. Historical cars should be preserved. They should be restored. Basically, it doesn't matter what the car itself is. If it has some really cool documented historical significance, it needs to be built. Now, the other one, like I said, sentimental factor. Let's say that it was a car that your grandpa or somebody that you were really close to bought brand new or had, or they taught you how to do stuff on it, or whatever makes it sentimental. That car gets kind of a pass, but only for those that it is sentimental to. Because you have to remember, the sentimental attachment is only to you. It's not to anybody else. So just because it has significance to you because it's sentimental, that does not translate to other people. They didn't know your grandpa or your uncle or whoever. So to them, it's just the car. It's just the 70 Duster. So you have to look at it that way. If you want to restore a car for significance because of sentimental reasons, then you've got to realize you're going to be putting a lot of money in it that doesn't really matter right now. But if and when it comes time to sell it, you have to take that into account as well, that doesn't matter to other people. If you were, think about it, if you were looking at a car, right, and they're like, well, my grandpa bought it brand new. That doesn't matter to you, right? Well, same goes for them. It doesn't matter to them that your grandpa bought it brand new. It's cool, but doesn't add value. So just realize that sentimental cars, yes, they can be more of a project than a parts car because of those reasons, but that's only because it matters to you and your family or whoever it does. And so only restore those cars if you plan to keep it. If you're looking to try to sell it anywhere in the future, just keep it how it is. Because another thing that I have learned, and this is another side note, is people enjoy things in different ways. I used to be one of those that absolutely hated the fact that somebody left a car sitting under the tree at their backyard, and man, why won't they sell me that car? Well, I've literally sold thousands of cars. I've been all over the country. I've met thousands of people, and it's been a blast. But I have learned that we all enjoy cars or anything in different ways. And sure, you may see that car right there when you see it out underneath the tree, but when they're looking at that car, all they're seeing is the stories, the history, how he and his wife went on their first date in that car back in 1979. They don't necessarily see the car the way we're seeing it. They see the car as it was and not as it is. So you've got to appreciate that. Whether you want to or not, you've got to appreciate their sentimental and their history and the way they look at it. And don't hate on them because they don't want to sell it. You might get your turn, you might not. But another thing I've learned doing this is there's millions of cars out there. You've just got to look. You've got to be willing to pay what they're worth, and you've got to be willing to do your homework. They don't just fall in your lap. Very, very, very few of these cars have fallen in my lap. And very, very few of these cars have came here local. If you followed me, I've literally been coast to coast, New York, California, and everywhere in between. And this is what I do. So I find these cars, they are out there. Just go look and be willing to do things. You're not going to find it in your backyard most of the time. I've had people call, they want parts, and they're like, oh, you're 50 miles away, that's way too far. Come on, guys, 50 miles, 200 miles, 300 miles. Yeah, 300 miles, but just remember, take your kid, take your spouse, take your friends, whatever. Go on that 300-mile road trip and start making that car sentimental to you. Get those memories, have that fun, make that experience, and go love it. That's the funnest part about this whole thing, is all of the experiences you get to have. Meeting people, going to car shows, going to events. It's absolutely amazing. It's fun. And I mean, that's what makes it what it is. Again, if you want to enjoy it just sitting in your garage, that's how you enjoy it, and that's fine. But I guarantee you the traveling and the going and meeting people and actually hunting all these parts down, hunting these cars down, that is the real fun. I mean, I look at my white Dart. We built that car. I hunted parts. I've got it basically where I want it. I love that car. I don't plan on ever selling it. But now that it's kind of where I want it, I've done my enjoyment. I love the hunt. I love the figuring out how to put it together the way I want it to make it mine. And now I want to work on other projects. So anyway, I hope that there was some good information in this video for you guys. I know it's probably a little bit long, but I just kind of wanted to explain why some of these cars are just parts cars, some of the cars are project cars, and all of in between. This car, yes, I have posted on Instagram. Nothing on the car is for sale. I am going to explain. Yeah, we did buy that car as a parts car. And the reason we bought that car as a parts car is, as I explained, it's got the 408 stroker, and it's got the rally gauges, and it's got a lot of really good parts. This car is a 72 344 speed rally, and this car has some sentimental value because it's been in the family for a long time. That car is also going to be built for Rat E-Body Challenge. Now, the car will eventually get completely restored, but right now, just the mechanical, the drivetrain, and everything. So this goes back to the sentimental, it goes back to the condition, and a whole bunch of other things that we've just covered. So one, the desirability factor at the end, because that's a real 344 speed car versus a 318 car, that one's going to be worth 20+% more when it's done than this car. This car is just 318 car. A lot of the parts that this car needs are right here. This car, you know, the 408 stroker will be great in that car. It would be great in this car as well, but it'll be fun in that car, and that car is a way cooler car. That being said, is this staying a parts car? No. It was purchased for those parts, and one of the family members here at the yard, she's actually a 16-year-old girl, wants to build this car after. I'm not sure what the plans are. I've kind of overheard putting a 340 in it a couple times. So yes, parts car currently, but not always. And you can always remember that as well, that just because it's a parts car now, or there's parts being used, doesn't mean it's remaining a parts car. But the better car in the long run is getting built first using parts from this car, and then that one will get built. So just food for thought. You can take parts off of a car that's sitting in your backyard that's going to be a project to build the one that you're building right now and replace those parts later. So anyway, again, thank you guys for watching. If you haven't, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps me out. And big adventure planned for next week and the week after. Hopefully it all goes through. I will let you know as soon as we go. Be sure to follow on Instagram and Facebook, because you're going to see some pictures that way, and you'll kind of know what's going on. I'm really excited about it. Really hoping that it all goes through. Anyway, thanks again. Have a great day.